Hello, welcome to Tweet the Leader in You podcast, where we chat about realistic leadership theories. On today's podcast, we are doing bigger and better things. Like I mentioned in the last few episodes, in this podcast, we're changing so many things around bigger, better, and inspirational, motivational, and all that good stuff. We started with our first guest co-host series, Scott Churchill, and now we have the amazing Jonathan Mugford, who will be doing our second guest co-host series. And yeah, what's going on, Jonathan? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing just great. I've had my coffee, had my yogurt. I am raring to go.
That's right. You're ready to go. See, I haven't had coffee yet. I actually just had a bowl of Activia yogurt, and so I think that's just pretty much fine for me and all that good stuff. And so yeah, let's just get right into introducing our actual guest, Jonathan. Ashely Hickey is an amazing branding individual, someone who is passionate about changing the shift of branding in each of the nonprofit organizations in general, and just sharing the light of being a human being as well. Welcome, Ashely. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and be here and talk about branding and what we've learned along the way, and hopefully it helps some people trying to find their own way in branding.
Yeah, so actually, today we'll be speaking about the importance of branding accessibility. And I know branding accessibility is a broad topic, but it's very important to share in today's world because educating people about it is just amazing. But first and foremost, we want to talk about who's Ashely. Share a bit about yourself, and then we're going to go into the discussion. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am both a computer programmer and a branding and designer. I mean, at my core, I chose the colors of black and white because when you start off in branding, you want to represent every different possible organization. And it's a fun fact. What is like everyone always says, but who am I? A person of many layers. If you take my branding colors and spin them on a disc, it actually makes a rainbow. It's actually called Benham's disc theory. If you take a black and a white, that's why I went with zebra stripes, and you put that on a disc and you spin it, you'll get a full rainbow. So that's me at my core. I'm a passionate designer who runs a company called Enzebra that represents end-to-end business. Personally, I'm just passionate about design and accessibility, and that everyone should tell their own story because only we can. And that at my core is true branding and accessibility. If you tell a brand story and you make it accessible for everyone, regardless of, age, disability, etc. I'm passionate about all of those causes. So I hope that answers.
Definitely. Jonathan, do you want to chime in to ask a quick question?
Oh, just love to hear your, I guess, origin story, for lack of a better term. What kind of got you onto the path of getting into branding?
Well, it actually goes way back. When I lived in a small town of about 500 people in a place called Marguerite in Cape Breton. And my family, we had party lines where I grew up. And for those of you who are too young to know what a party line is, it's when someone calls you and it rings twice for your neighbor and you have a different ring than them.
Yeah.
So I delivered phone books for a part-time job.
Wow.
And I grew up with a fairly significant illness, which I still have. Obviously, it's lifelong. And I always knew I was never going to be able to work with people because I'm immune compromised and I get blood products every 28 days. So I always knew before I was young, that I always need 14 days a year to go to hospitals. So my family member gave me a computer and said the computers will always be able to do what you can't. And that was, this is back in 1997. So you can imagine I owned, and I remember the very first time I pulled up, I think it was GeoCities at the time or Angel Fire. Yes, I know I'm dating myself here, but I remembered the colors. And back then it wasn't very many, but I always remember it was right after that, I actually sew and design as a hobby as well. And I made these patchwork pants because I always wanted to stand out. In a classroom of 19 kids, where 3 of us were actually called Ashely, that was really hard to do.
Wow.
And so I've always been somewhat colorful as a person. And so that's where it started with the design and my personal brand, is that I always wanted to stand out because I was always just a little bit different. Skipped a couple grades, and it was always about telling that story. And so that is what led me to get into branding and designs, and it really was always my story.
Wow, wow. And I keep on hearing your
Wow.
story, telling your story and journey. And as we continue to promote the importance of branding accessibility, what is one lesson and tip and a part of your story that you want to share when it comes down to that?
I mean, really, when it comes down to it, tell your own story because nobody else can. We say in a world where we concern ourselves with people copying other people's ideas, you are your own unique imprint, and stay true to yourself, whatever that is. When I looked at even my own company branding, I said, what are the things that are important to me? Enzebra actually just means English zebra. I did my 23andMe, and it said I was predominantly English. A zebra is a community term for a rare illness. They're also majestic, and no zebra's stripes are actually the same. So it's just be yourself, and don't try to, every tech company in the world, it seems, is blue. Don't do what the status quo tells you. Think about your brand is not your product name, it's who you are. You can, a Google was never a Google until they made it a Google. What was an Uber? They made it a noun. And so, similarly, think about what's important to you before you start anything with a personal brand. I always believed, actually, when I was setting up my resume for the first time, I used to actually spray perfume on them, which made me laugh anyways. I was printing them on pink paper. I just printed them on pink paper because in a stack of papers, you just need to, when I laughed every time I dropped one off, and I used a different font than other people. And it's about so I believe that a person should have a personal brand even before they have a product brand.
Wow.
And so whenever I did my resumes, I always had a certain flair about them. For anyone that's ever seen my resume, it's very colorful, and it's quite funny. And it's about when you present yourself as when you go home and you sleep well at night, if you made someone laugh, if you didn't get the job or you didn't get the customer because you cast your unique style, you weren't a good fit in the first place, and they did you a favor. And so that's why I always knew that I wasn't going to fit into every workplace, or every client isn't my ideal client either, and vice versa. That's why there's a whole suite of people that do what we do. But I always, at the end of the day, told things in the narrative that I wanted the world to see me. And if that was welcoming to them, and that's what I would say, start with your personal brand and identify, what we kind of have a formula for doing that when we work with people, even before they have a company, to identify that, that core personality.
Right. Wow. That's
Yeah.
that. Wow.
That was probably very long.
That's
saying that.
Yeah. I really gotta say, I love the idea of putting perfume on the resumes. I think that's the first time I ever heard of a scratch and sniff resume, and I love it. That's so cool.
It was old school. I used to use the old Britney Fantasy. I tell you, that stuff smells like rainbows and happiness. Or 2004 called, and they want their style back.
Yeah. So Jonathan, do you have a next question?
Sure. Is there a particular moment in your life that you reflect on, any time that kind of helped you really realize the importance of branding, or was it just more of a kind of gradual throughout kind of your time developing?
I think there were multiple times. I reflect back. I'll choose one that's a little more recently because I found it's been, I've certainly had my ups and downs in life. And I'll say a more recent one in terms of, I guess it's the first one that comes to mind because I could probably name about 10, is we all have kind of I always used to say, because I've been living on my own since I was 16. And I'm self-sufficient since I'm actually working since 16. And I always felt that it was kind of like you had to develop a standard operating procedure. Yes, I know computers, but at my core, it was always stay true to my brand. And so it's kind of like that pillar that every time something scared the bejesus out of me, that I reflected back on. And I remember the last job I had, I worked with a group out of the UK, and they designed, they're not for profit, and they they develop medical. They write all the medical terminology for 23
Mm-hmm.
countries, including our own. And I was hired 7 years ago to work on the interface for this particular solution, but the solution never existed yet. Actually, no one
Mm-hmm.
had attempted to do what they were doing. And I was working for the company for literally a week,
Wow.
and I was flown, and now pretty humble origins, okay. And I was flown, across the world, and I was put in a room in front of people, and we had to discuss the software solution and demo it. So this was a couple months later, and the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
went down. I mean, down. And this was a group that were not. It was a big change, and no one likes change. But my personal brand is to tell a story and to fill in the ad libs. And although it didn't even have to
Mm-hmm.
do with color and accessibility, it gave me, because I had that comfort level of having that conversation
Mm-hmm.
about this new software product, that my personal brand got me through that moment and was able to at least even add fillers. And even that doesn't come down to colors and accessibility, but because I felt this interface and design was such a reflection of me, and I had that confidence, be connected with the things that you design, whether they're interfaces or logos. Because if things go downhill, you can ad lib
Mm-hmm.
and you can have a conversation. If the whole
Yeah,
server
yeah,
if
yeah.
the whole server crashes, so I guess that would be. I don't know if that was quite what you were looking for, but
Yeah, I think that's very important
No,
to
that's
watch
perfect.
what you brand, and also make sure that you're connecting the dots and all that good stuff. Was there a time in your life where when you had the importance of branding accessibility, was there a time in your life where you didn't feel that your brand was accommodated?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I I can't tell you how many times I've been told that
Mm-hmm.
you need to be more professional, or you need to be you just can't do that. You can't. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
believe in AA and AAA accessibility because I you know I always found it frustrating as a person. I don't, not only just my brand. I don't know how many times I've been
Wow.
told I can't be
Mm-hmm.
accommodated because of my disability. And I mean, if you tell anyone, I remember looking at, I started out my career saying I need 14 days off. Not off. I always worked around them. Like I take my computer. I
Wow.
work in the hospital 14 days a year, and so the reason I made my focus on accessibility is because we should accommodate everyone. There are people, you know, whether it's wheelchair ramps, whether it's anything, screen readers. I have family members that have in I
Mm-hmm.
actually had surgery on my eyes as well. I used to actually, to get my driver's license, I actually had to have LASIK surgery because it got to the point that the lenses of my glasses were so thick
Wow.
they couldn't get them in the frames. My last pair of glasses before I had LASIK, it was $1,000 just for the lenses, and that was like 8 years ago. And so I said, if I'm going to do this, so I believe in mobile first, and the reason being, in a lot of developing countries,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mobile is all people can afford. I believe in multilingual because language should be accessible. There's some incredible AI right now. I use AWS translations through Amazon. Uh, we should be accommodating people's language. Also, why people use one thing you'll very seldom see unless it's an explicit requirement. I will never
Yeah,
use
yeah.
red. People are colorblind. Uh, I use high contrast.
Oh,
The reason being is that we as a culture, as a society, are not in the business of accommodating the, the small group. And I thought, the most brilliant things happen when you take people from different walks of life. Because when you take a person that suddenly couldn't see a website, or couldn't hear it, or
Mm-hmm.
they're just differently abled in some way, and you enable them access to new information, like the young kid I was in Marguerite, who just
Mm-hmm.
had the paper library, and then I was allowed on the internet, and it changed my whole world. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
exactly the world's happiest kid either, and it showed me that there was a whole world out there, and I want to enable that for everyone, and I
Wow.
think that is so
Wow.
important.
Wow. Wow. That's really a touch on the
yeah.
spot. And I hate when people don't accommodate and don't see the importance of diverse perspective. And diversity has a broad context when it comes down to defining it. And I see a lot of organizations today, they always try to say, oh, we're we're accommodating, we're diversified and all this stuff, but then you don't see it in their work. You don't actually see it in the
Yeah.
work that they do. And so, what is your definition of diversity when it comes down to that perspective?
You know what? I think my fundamental belief in diversity is that everyone
Correct.
that we're all different. Whether as a woman in technology, I know a lot of people don't go in that industry. But even if, like I said, like I have a young daughter, and I said, she wants to become a car mechanic, go for it. What I believe in diversity is that
Mm,
everyone has equal opportunity to pursue what they believe in, regardless of anything about them. That even if you're in a wheelchair and you want to
mm,
work at a warehousing plant, it might not be easy, and you might have to do it differently. But I believe everyone should
mm,
just be able to do any job. And I also think we need to be less
mm,
prohibitive about educational diversity. Some people, the most brilliant minds, we put
Mm.
so many rules on not just culture, race, gender, education. Why can't people just be the sum of their experience and skills? And if they can show up and do the job and
yeah.
prove that they can, let's allow them to try. And I mean, mentorship has been such a big part of my personal brand. People that are just one thing I love, and the last organization I work with, you had people from, when you
Yeah.
take different races, cultures,
Yeah.
backgrounds, even social economic backgrounds, and put them in a room, and don't make it about, the culture. Make it about a discussion, and you start a topic. You just
Right.
get different ideas by putting different perspectives around one table. And I love that. I mean, when I started my company, I didn't want to hire another me. I wouldn't want to work with me either. But uh, you need that grading, that different, that contrast. That you
Right.
need those differences, because that's what makes the world beautiful. And
Wow.
that the world is
Wow.
just different.
And like I said, I always try to define um to
Yeah.
professors, because professors, I always try to tell them that you are a global professor. You have persons from each country in your classroom. You must allow your mind to gain a lot of different perspectives and have a global conversation with individuals. Try to learn persons belief
Exactly.
and also their perspective from what they've brought up in their country wise, because if we all try to do that in the educational system, we will be such better human beings when it comes down to learning and evolving. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I remember, and this is a much smaller variation of that.
Yeah.
The school
Hmm.
that I grew up in, it was
Hmm.
P to 12, 200 kids. You're talking about a remote community. It
Yep.
was a 2-hour drive to go to like a superstore, for example. One gas station, that's it. And I remember I competed in the National Science Fair, and I got to go on a plane for the first time. And I was going to Calgary, and that opened up my whole world in terms of, while it wasn't a different country, it was a
Hmm.
different culture. It was completely like anything I had ever seen. And if you take that one step further, that perspective of when I came back to the small town, I
Hmm.
knew that the world was bigger. I knew that there were different cultures. I saw things that I didn't ever really believe.
Hmm.
I know, and I know that sounds ridiculous within one country, but this is a tiny town. And if we take that step further and we have that conversation with globally, if we could share those experiences, and I always loved when I worked with a not for profit, it was
Hmm.
global. They actually had people that worked remotely from every country, pretty much all over. And when we got together, just the food, the colors, I learned so much about, kind of, I'll say, the fabric of our lives from people that when I travel, I actually, because I
Hmm.
sew, I always bring back a couple meters of fabric from whatever country I'm in, because the color. For example, I had a coworker that her husband is from Ghana, and she brings
Hmm.
back the fabric, and just the richness of the color and the expression, the self-expression in these fabrics, makes me think that if we just took all of that in the education system in the workplace and just let us be our own, everyone wear their own colors, and just tell and share that, it'll make such an interesting perspective and unique. Just let people, we
Hmm.
sometimes try to conform to corporate culture, and I guess I'm a little bit of
Yeah.
not an anti-conformist, but I like when I sit with my clients, I try to see what is their unique diversity, where
Yeah.
and to model everything, that every business is unique, every person is unique, and we need to let people just, because knowledge is power and the sum of our experience is power, and having that in the education system and workplaces, it's just great in my opinion.
Right, right. And I
Mm.
feel that once the branding, the accessibility, the inclusion is all connected, it brings a form of equality, but not only equality, it brings a form of
Honesty.
success, story, and honesty. Yeah. It brings that empowering way of how the organization will see growth moving forward in all that good stuff. And so I think that when we move forward, and one more question I have for you is, in the midst of all the things that people didn't accommodate you, and sometimes you had to go through so much struggle, how did you overcome, and how did you had to fix certain situations in that area?
Well, apart from those 5 trips I took to Vegas and a lot of money on a therapist, I'm just kidding. Not about the Vegas. I didn't do that. The biggest thing I tried to do was at first, I won't lie and said that I tried to force myself to fit a square peg into a round hole, and then it was in that I realized that this was just never going to work, and I was miserable. So I guess what I tried to do is meet people in the middle. That if
Mm-hmm.
is to although we are unique, sometimes we can just be a little bit out there. It's not socially palatable, and I'm working on that. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can show the value of uh, you know if you enable accessibility and color, your organization has more organic growth. And so I guess for me it was a lot of soul searching and then just proving it. To me it's just when you see effective brands.
Mm-hmm.
I actually put my brand on a logo, and it actually became an accidental fashion store, and it's showing. And so how I overcame that was just working success. The best thing you can do when you're down in life is just do well.
Right.
And it was just one brand at a time to make it. I needed to prove to myself that this was a a great approach, and that I needed to feel good at night. And so I just, one thing at a time, I started taking on contractual work, and then just having one impactful brand after another and seeing the impact of that. That was honestly how I got over it, because it's a lifelong battle, and it
Yeah.
still is,
Wow.
about
Wow.
accessibility.
Wow. Ashely, you are an amazing individual. Thank you so much for just sharing with
Thank
me
you.
the importance, and also sharing to our listening um, persons, audience, viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call it, just empowering them to be the change and to be agents of a difference maker. Jonathan, what do you think about this podcast, this episode in particular, man?
I think it's been an absolute joy to have a conversation with you today, Ashley. I want to thank you myself for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. It's been really wonderful to hear.
And the pleasure's all mine. I really truly enjoyed meeting both of you, and talking with this sort of thing.
Definitely, definitely. When you are in leadership, you have to continue to empower, continue to do change agent things. And to be a change agent, you have to be inclusive. You have to try to have a skill of fairness. And also, you have to have a branding, accessibility skill inside that. And I would always try to say, define what it means to you.
I
What
think
does branding accessibility means to you? What does skill development means to you? And make sure that you be the change in all that good stuff. Did you want to share something for a little bit, Ashely?
Yeah, I think what the last thing I would just say is that when you think of branding and accessibility, there's a point about it that we all need to learn humility, and
Mm-hmm.
that so many of us are going through things that we are embarrassed to tell our stories because we think people will judge us or they will look
Mm-hmm.
at us differently. When you get to the point in the strength and you realize that knowledge and that experience and that your own story is the power of change for others,
Mm-hmm.
you'll just go on and do great things.
Definitely, definitely. I think doing great things is awesome. And I encourage people, do great things. Do good for people who you want to do good for you. And I think that's the only quote I'm going to leave Thank you so much, and see you at the
Thank
next
you so
episode.
much. Take care.
Awesome.